Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be doing something a little different today. I'm going to be reacting to the latest episode of the Sam Harris podcast. Now, I won't be going through the whole thing. In fact, I'm not even going to be looking at the main portion of it. I just want to focus in on his intro, where he addresses current events and, in particular, the January 6th hearings. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, well, it's been a big week for news. There are many things happening in the world. Of course, there were the January 6th hearings, which are not at all the partisan witch hunt that Republicans are claiming. Most of the witnesses have been Republicans. That should be a pretty obvious point. And most have been avid Trump supporters. Most of them did this lunatic's bidding up until the last moment, when they were staring into the abyss.
Well, believe it or not, it's actually harder to accept these people's testimonies precisely because they decided to jump ship and try to salvage their reputation by making up lies against Trump after the fact. The left is ruthless, except if you're a turncoat and give them the slightest bit of ammo against Trump. This has happened over and over. Mitt Romney, John McCain, Liz Cheney, Anthony Scaramucci, Omarosa, Stormy Daniels, and now Cassidy Hutchinson. There's a clear pattern of rewarding people who go against Trump, even if it's all completely made up. The opposition against Trump has historically been bad press. So whether it's real or made up, it's their biggest tool. It's their go-to. They spent 5 years attacking every aspect of Trump and giving a voice to any and all disgruntled people in Trump's massive orbit. And yet somehow he still gained over 11 million votes.
Some of them, like Cassidy Hutchinson, whose testimony was the most damaging to Trump.
It's the most damaging if you can't differentiate between fact and fiction. And this is surprising, coming from Sam Harris, who is this renowned atheist who probably prides himself quite a bit in his BS detector. Billions of people are religious, and yet Sam Harris is smarter than them all. There's a study that contrasted kids who grew up religious and kids who did not. They would read stories that were obviously fiction and unrealistic to both groups of people. And the kids who grew up in church had a harder time deciding if those stories were real or not, and failed the test more often than the non-religious kids did. So you would think that Sam Harris could hear the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson, especially the part about the gorillas, and he would say, this person is crazy, and her testimony is discredited ipso facto. But when they say Trump broke people's brains, this is what they mean. Anything unflattering to Trump becomes credible simply because it's unflattering to Trump. If you really think that Trump is Hitler 2.0, then spreading lies about him, stealing the election from him, putting on a show trial for him, all becomes really easy to do because it's necessary to do it.
Have everything to lose from coming forward. No doubt she and her family are now besieged by death threats and very real security concerns. She was an extremely compelling witness. She was obviously a Republican partisan down to her toes, and yet she recognized that what happened in the run-up to January 6th, all the cultic hysteria whipped up by the big lie, and then what happened on the day itself, was an abomination.
She realized the system was so corrupt and rigged that even though there was tons of evidence to support Trump's claims, the system was never going to let any of that stuff be allowed to gain any traction. And so she sold her soul and jumped ship.
Perhaps I should emphasize for the 100th time that political partisanship has nothing to do with this.
That's just an outright lie. As I always say, my main disagreements with people politically are in the difference we have in how much trust we have in the system, and if it actually works, or is fair, or is bipartisan, which of course none of it is. The author of Sherlock Holmes, Arthur C. Doyle, was infamous for his belief in the Cottingley fairies, which were obviously fake pictures, taken at a time when photographs were still very new. These girls would sneak off into the woods and take pictures of themselves with drawings they had made. Well, Doyle fell for these completely. That statement by Sam Harris is his Arthur C. Doyle moment. What person in their right mind can't see through the thick amount of lies that we live in daily and can't recognize them? It's pathetic.
Liz Cheney is one of the people running these hearings. She is a conservative Republican. She is pro-life and against gay marriage. She is, by my lights, a religious extremist. I am sure I disagree with 95% of her politics.
Except that literally no conservatives like her at all, anywhere, because she's transformed into the most common type of Republican, which is a rhino. They have that R next to their name, but in everything that matters, they side with the enemy. A backstabber to the principles and the people who got them elected. And she'll most likely be voted out of office in November because of everything I just mentioned.
But she is a straight-up American hero in my book.
Of course, because she's on your side.
On a bad day, she's doing more to support and defend the Constitution of the United States than the rest of the Republican Party has done in years. She is standing between us and the utter dismantling and desecration of our democracy.
And that's exactly why she should be thrown into the proverbial wood chipper. Hiding behind defending our democracy? Give me a break.
This is not a partisan point. For instance, I'll concede that almost anything bad that is said about the Democrats now is probably true. Biden appears unfit for office. Whether he's actually senile, I don't know. But he simply can't communicate the way the president needs to. I mean, you watch these speeches and interviews and press conferences, insofar as they even take place. Every sentence is a death-defying feat. It's like watching your mom do parkour. You're just waiting for the worst thing that has ever happened every fucking second. And he is totally unfit to run again in 2024. And Kamala Harris is probably worse. Though she might be fine neurologically, she still manages to speak in word salad in an apparent effort to talk down to people. Have you seen these snippets of her circulating? Many of the things she says are completely mystifying. It's like someone trained an AI on woke Twitter and had it talk to itself for the equivalent of 1,000 years, and it went properly insane. And as a political candidate, she manages to convey a disingenuousness that makes Hillary Clinton seem like Will Rogers. This administration is doomed, right? And has been doomed almost since the very beginning.
Well, I hate to break it to you, dude, but he couldn't do any of that before he took office. And every conservative pointed that out every day during his entire campaign. And you still have people like Bill Maher who refuse to even acknowledge that he so far has even lost a step. Then you have to ask yourself, why was this duo of knee pads and pee pads was even selected? Bernie was way more popular and was strategically taken out by the Democrats to get Biden the nomination. And Kamala was at 0% in the polls. Why was Biden and Harris pushed to the front of the line when both of them were so unpopular and so unlikable, and then ran a campaign that was so off the grid they couldn't even fill events that had a handful of people? I get that they had COVID concerns, but you would think that they would have to be pushing masses of humanity away from his events. But that wasn't the case. I mean, there was no one. And then somehow he won the election, and not only won it, but won it with 81 million votes. Hillary Clinton received 65 million votes when she ran against Hitler 2.0. But you're telling me Joe Biden, who was calling his own supporters fat and challenging people to push-up contests and losing his temper, stumbling around, looking lost all the time, making a different gaffe every single day, calling a lid on over half the days in September, and working damage control on Hunter Biden, somehow got 16 million more votes than Hillary, who apparently lost because she didn't visit Michigan. Yeah, he beat her, sure.
But Biden and Harris saved our democracy by beating Trump.
Because the American population was so concerned for our democracy? The election is democracy, you idiot. Joe Biden won the election. That's how he saved our democracy? If Trump won, would that make him the savior of democracy too? When Democrats win, that's democracy. Is that it? And when Republicans win, that's not democracy. Is that really the argument he's making here? I have to wonder sometimes if people even consider what a stolen election would look like if it happened. Surely they don't deny that elections can't be meddled with, right? Well, if more people vote than are even registered to vote, then that would be a sign that something is wrong, correct? And when you type in a dead person's name into the voter registry and see that they were registered 4 months before the election and they died 50 years ago, that would be a sign that something is wrong, right? And when you need mail-in ballots to have signatures to be valid and all across the country in every swing state, you find tens of thousands of ballots without signatures that all somehow go to one candidate. That would be a sign that something is up, right? Or does that just happen in every free and fair election? And then they might use COVID as an excuse to push poll watchers and election officials over 60 feet away from where you're scanning ballots in. And then they might go get plywood to put over the windows to completely block anyone from seeing any of the very safe and free and fair election activity inside. That's okay, I guess. We just let that go. That's just democracy as usual. Then, after the election is over and the counting supposedly had stopped and all the poll watchers were sent home, in the middle of the night, in multiple swing states, they somehow find hundreds of thousands of votes, all containing almost 100% votes for the candidate who was behind. Just enough to push him over the top. Would that be something we should look into? Or is that just completely off limits? Is that just okay and that happens in every free and fair election? And the guy who benefits from all of that is the savior of democracy? Are you kidding me?
And as odious and as incompetent as the Democrats have become, there is simply no comparison between them and what the Republicans have become under Trump. Trump and Trumpism is not just a symptom of a deeper problem. They are that too, but they are also a cancer that has been actively destroying our politics. You have to cut out the cancer. Trump has always been and remains a litmus test. The real Trump derangement syndrome is to not see how abnormal he is as a person, and to not see or to not care how abnormal it is that such a person could have ever become the president of the United States. Right? That's the real Trump derangement syndrome. To say or to think things like, well, all politicians lie, right? What's the difference with Trump? There's no both sides to this political moment.
Oh, but there is. Joe Biden is currently claiming that we are in a historic economic boom. Well, that's a lie. He's claiming inflation was transitory. He's blaming gas prices on Putin. He's claiming the border is secure when 250,000 people a month are coming across. He abandoned U.S. citizens in Afghanistan and let the Taliban take over the country when he said he actually had a plan to get us out. He's had more people die from COVID under his presidency than under Trump's. And he said that anyone allowed that many deaths to happen was unfit for the office. But apparently not for him, I guess. He lied in December when he said he would never make vaccines mandatory. And then just a couple months later, he made them mandatory. He constantly lies about his relationship to Hunter Biden, which at this point shows a clear conflict of interest with China and Ukraine and our energy. He enabled Hunter at every step, whether it was paying for hookers or setting him up with cushy jobs or helping him cover up buying a gun when he lied on a background check. Joe is involved in all of that. And putting his son aside, you could make debates between Joe Biden from 40 years ago and Joe Biden today, where he's clearly lying and only represents an empty suit who says whatever is necessary to gain power for himself and his family.
Making Trump president was like making Alex Jones the lead anchor on the nightly news. Whatever you want to say about the media, whatever you want to say about CNN, for instance, about the errors of journalism they make over there, and about how woke everyone is, it would be orders of magnitude worse, and the degradation of our journalistic standards would be complete if they swapped in Alex Jones for Anderson Cooper. That would be a totally different world, journalistically speaking.
Well, I'll just say this. There is an Alex Jones was right jar, but there is not an Anderson Cooper was right jar. So make of that what you will.
And that's where we are with the Republican Party. Apart from the few brave people like Liz Cheney who are trying to save it from itself. Anyway, if you haven't been following the hearings for whatever reason, you're missing something. Right? The window they have opened onto the last days of the Trump administration is beyond unflattering. And the prospect that we may one day see the orange man in an orange jumpsuit seems to have grown a little. It's hard to imagine him not being prosecuted now, after what we've learned. That is, of course, if he doesn't become president again in the meantime, which remains a real possibility.
The bottom line is that they don't like it when the controlled opposition party starts to get a little too uncontrolled. They're fine with the Republican Party so long as it plays by the rules that the left sets. As long as the Republicans never go any further than Liz Cheney or McCain, they're happy to have them around, which is all you need to know. And that's where I'm going to call it. He starts to go into abortion and other topics, which I'm not going to go over today. Anyways, that's all the time I have. If you enjoyed this video and type of content I'm making, consider giving this video a like or maybe subscribing. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.